Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Dewey Bredeson of Madison is a Democratic candidate in the 76th Assembly District. The primary is August 11. Dewey, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you.
Prior to getting into some specific issues, let me ask you, what do you consider the top issue in your campaign?
Well, people are suffering, businesses are going under, and the government budget has been busted by this COVID-19 virus. I think that's going to be the top issue for the next 2 years. On top of that, small businesses in the state capital square area were vandalized and looted. We're suffering physically, mentally, and financially. We're fearful for our income, housing, education, and health. These are the biggest needs in the District 76, and these will be my priorities.
Okay, you just listed some very, very important issues. I want you to pick one as the one you'd concentrate on first if you're a member of the Assembly.
So probably the immediate need for housing for when people are losing their jobs and the immediate needs that are going to be happening as the ongoing COVID things, and it affects the economy more and more, and then getting the economy back up into shape.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. The governor has said we may not collect $2 billion in taxes because of COVID. If you're a member of the Assembly, your choice would be pretty difficult. You either cut spending or you raise taxes or fees. What would be your position?
Okay, so you're asking me to predict the future here.
Yes.
There's a lot of moving parts.
Yes, sir.
But I do believe there will be a large hole in the budget. And the biggest question will be, will we get any federal money? But then the first thing we will need to do is get the economy running again. We do that not by denying that there's a problem, but ensuring there's enough personal protective equipment, testing, and contact tracing so that people feel safe participating in the economy as consumers and workers.
Okay. And that doesn't come down to a choice of either cut spending or tax increase then, right? So your priority is making sure that we can take the safety precautions to deal with the pandemic.
Just to get the economy running again so that the tax revenues come back in as they were before. I think that's the first thing that needs to happen. Okay.
New subject. Who should draw the next congressional and legislative boundary lines? The Constitution says the party in power in the Capitol. The governor has recommended a People's Commission that would draw the boundaries and then forward it to the elected officials. What's your position?
Both parties have engaged in gerrymandering in the past. I favor a nonpartisan board as it exists in other states. It's the only fair way to keep politics out of what should be a non-political issue or process. We need fair maps that should respect community boundaries. Districts should be compact. Politicians should not be picking their constituents. And as data continues to be more prevalent, it's only going to get worse. I also believe that the way voting lines are drawn today, makes us a more divided nation with representation way on the left or way on the right and no one in the middle. Incumbents are more likely to be challenged by someone on the fringes of their party rather than someone from the opposite party.
Okay. What's your position on medical and recreational marijuana?
Marijuana should be legalized and regulated for medical and recreational use in adults in Wisconsin. We're expending resources on a non-problem and losing tax revenue to other states. A majority of the citizens in Wisconsin support legalization, and it should happen now.
The governor has recommended a special session to enact universal statewide training standards for police. Part of those would be banning chokeholds, banning no-knock warrants, keeping a database of officers most prone to violence. Do you support the governor's changes?
Our criminal justice system, does not treat all our citizens equally, and that needs to change. The recent killing of George Floyd only reinforces how bad it is. We need to, at a minimum, hold police accountable and change policies that promote and continue systemic racism. There's a change in the air now, and we need to solve this issue.
Let's talk about property taxes. Wisconsin has some of the highest property taxes in the nation, which is why what school districts and local governments can levy in property taxes is capped or limited, although referendums, of course, you can exceed the caps. If you're a member of the Assembly, would you vote to keep those property tax caps and limits in place or do away with them?
I would eliminate the levy limits because local officials are in the best position to make these decisions, and they are answerable to the voters. In trying to make up revenue shortfalls, local governments and schools add fees to items that were formerly free. Across the country, revenue from fees has increased from 16% in 1974 to 23% in 2015. These fees fall disproportionately on lower income folks and take a greater portion of their income. So in addition, mounting a referendum is always an expensive proposition, and that money should be going towards education.
Because local governments are so reliant on the property tax, is it time to consider alternative revenue sources for them? I'm going to throw out two. That we broaden the sales tax, the 5% state sales tax, to some now exempt products and services, or maybe even give local governments the option of levying the half-cent sales tax. Now only counties can do it. Is it time to consider alternative revenue sources for local governments, Dewey?
I would agree that high property taxes are hard on people with fixed incomes and our retirees. So yes, I would look at other taxes and user fees to reduce the property taxes and sufficiently fund local municipal services. Though some thought needs to be put into expanding the sales tax, as it can be regressive and hit harder on less fortunate citizens. For example, the wheel tax recently passed in Madison is harder on low income wage earners that need to drive to work. Plus, in hindsight, now with the COVID epidemic, making mass transit more of a risk to your health than traveling by car. So, however, I am sure there are some items we could add the sales tax to. I just don't know what they are right now today.
Okay, thank you. And you alluded in your opening statement to the pandemic. So a couple of follow-up questions on that. It's hit the economy and healthcare providers that the state relies on especially hard. Recessions cause less revenue for the state. We've talked about that. More demands for safety net programs like Medicaid. If you're in the Assembly voting on the next state budget, should hospitals be made a greater priority than perhaps they are in the current budget? We've seen hospitals on the front lines of treating the pandemic. What your thoughts?
Sure. All analysis show that Wisconsin has sufficient hospital beds to handle the pandemic. I don't think the state should invest in hospitals as they can expand as needed by bonding and other kinds of financing available to them. However, healthcare is much more than just hospitals. There are clinics and nursing homes and home care providers that probably impact Medicaid recipients' healthcare needs even more than hospitals. So this next budget will be exceptionally tight with less income and more needs because of the pandemic. If elected, I would look to the needs of the least fortunate, who have always been the hardest hit by this virus, and as a priority to receive help. Okay. Wisconsin needs a strategic plan that is updated annually. We were not ready for this pandemic. The unemployment system was and still is not able to respond as it should. The governor's office should have orders already drafted that can be put into effect immediately. And there must be more help for people who cannot pay rent or mortgages due to the job cut or loss. And the department, DPI needs to give guidance to opening schools so that also considers the impact of children not attending in person the whole week and the availability of daycare.
Follow-up question on the pandemic. Should businesses that follow all the prescribed safety and health standards, either from WEDC or the national CDC, should they be immune from frivolous lawsuits?
I do support liability protections for businesses that have followed the prescribed COVID-19 protections and recommendations from frivolous lawsuits. We need to listen to the experts and scientists, and as we learn more about this virus, we need to make the necessary adjustments. I wish this pandemic would go away soon, but it does not look likely to happen in the near future, and we need to plan for that. As I stated earlier, we need enough personal protective equipment, testing, and contact tracing so that people feel safe going out to work and going out.
Okay. Let's talk about when local governments approve major public works contracts. A study said in 2015, out-of-state contractors got $72 million in contracts for some of these local government public works projects. That $72 million doubled to $146 million in 2018. The question is, should bidding standards and requirements give preferences to Wisconsin companies when local governments authorize these major public projects?
I do believe that they should. And then that way, the taxes that are paid from those projects to them, to laborers working in them, would also get recirculated back into the state. And I don't know what the multiplier of that number would be, but I'm guessing it's considerable, and that should be taken into effect when you do these projects.
We've talked about a number of issues. Is there anything that is key or central to your campaign? Any other issue that we haven't touched on, sir?
We didn't talk too much about housing. I would say that's probably what I know the most about, being in real estate. So I've got extensive knowledge in housing for both seniors and for low income.
Okay. So you would want to take our current policies even further in the area of housing?
I would.
Yeah. Okay. Then maybe final question. You want to highlight differences between you? It's a pretty busy race, Dewey. Why are you the most qualified?
Okay. So there's 6 other individuals running for this seat, and I admire them all for putting themselves out there and believe they're wonderful human beings, and I have nothing negative to say about any of them. So I'm going to talk about myself. I'm a leader with common sense, compassion for people's needs. I understand economics and believe in science. I have 40 years in business experience, listening to people's needs and finding solutions to their problems. I have vast knowledge of housing, including low income and senior housing. I have always and shall continue to treat everyone fairly, with respect and dignity. And Wisconsin needs vision, not division. That's why I'm running for the 76th Assembly District.
Dewey Bredeson of Madison is a Democrat running in the 76th Assembly District. The primary is August 11. Dewey, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.